Hello everyone and welcome back to JD TV. I'm your host Josh and we have a special preview coming up. Canada is taking on Qatar in a friendly, and to help me break it down, go over the lineups, and basically just kind of take a look at this upcoming match, which I'm very excited about, I've brought on Joshua Kloke of The Athletic and author of his new book, The Voyageurs. Joshua, how are you doing today? I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on.
It's going to be an interesting one. Now, we haven't seen our national team play in quite some time, so I think we're pretty excited, not only because we get to actually watch them in action, but because we get to see them play a nation outside of CONCACAF for the first time since January 2020. I often mention that because I truly believe it's important to get that experience from outside, and Qatar is going to be a decent test. This is a side that is familiar with CONCACAF opposition. They have a 3-1-1 record in the previous edition of the Gold Cup. They've taken on teams like the U.S., I mean, whatever version of the U.S. you think that is, I mean, they still put up a decent fight, and I'm really excited to it. But let's start off with the roster drop. Now, I predicted that there was going to be 26 players because it's, you're allowed to bring 26 players to the World Cup. Herdman likes kind of keeping that smaller group together, usually around 25. But because of the Buchanan injury, I think that's why there's that extra guy there, whether it's, you could consider Brim, Koleosho, Corbeanu, whoever it is. That's kind of what my gut is telling me, but there's a few surprises. On top of that, Corbeanu got recalled. Koleosho's there. Waterman, of course, is in, which a lot of us, I think, are pretty excited about. There's the Hutch and, of course, Buchanan and Henry injuries. So, Joshua, where do you want to start when you first looked at that roster announcement? What maybe took you by surprise the most?
I don't know how much took me by surprise. I mean, I think anybody that would have watched Joel Waterman this season would agree that his play warrants a call-up. He's just an incredibly talented player on the ball. He's got great vision, great passing ability. And, I know this probably doesn't factor into John Herdman's plans, but just as a story, a few years ago, he's playing in the CPL and now he's put himself in a really good position to go to the World Cup. I mean, if you need kind of a pipeline or if you need a blueprint for Canadian players, young Canadian players to follow, there it is, right? So I think Joel Waterman getting into the squad is interesting. Now, Daniil Henry's injury, we don't know how serious it is. Daniil Henry's injury kind of complicates things there with Joel Waterman. We can talk about this and debate, but I am firmly on team bring Daniil Henry to the World Cup, as perhaps controversial as that is, especially with some TFC fans. But I think, what he brings to the dressing room, what he brings to that squad chemistry is so vital. What he brings to, training, which is something we don't often talk about, in the World Cup. Some of these center backs are going to need rests between games, and you're going to need players to come in and raise the level in training. So I think Daniil Henry is important there. So I guess his injury, we don't know how serious it is yet. Luca Koleosho is one that's not surprising to me at all. You're talking to people in and around the national team. I think there was initially some concern after the June window when he comes in for 7 days, which was always the plan. He doesn't see the pitch at all for obvious reasons, and then returns to Espanyol to begin his preseason training. But I think there was initially some concern in the days afterwards, but through more and more conversations with Luca, I think that the national team feels like he is, about as close to committing as possible. So him getting back into the squad, and he's played more and more games. He's got more and more minutes for Espanyol. Again, as a 17-year-old in La Liga, that's impressive. And so if you're John Herdman, you probably want to have one eye towards 2026 and bringing him in. So those two players in particular stood out, but neither are really surprises. And I think that only makes John Herdman's decision, making when it comes to the World Cup squad that much more of a difficult task, right? Because you have two new players who, have been playing pretty well and probably warrant a conversation to whether or not they should be in the final squad too, right?
Yeah, I mean, and the biggest thing with me with Joel Waterman, because a lot of us were surprised he wasn't called up last camp. He's been in incredible form. There's 5 players from that CF Montreal side who are all on incredible form right now. He's got a lot of chemistry. I think he'll be a true fit to this team. But in the back of my mind, when I was looking at this potential 26-man roster, I was like, one of the center backs has to be left off. Now, I didn't know at the time that Henry picked up an injury, but I agree with you. I don't think that there's any way that Donnie Henry doesn't go on that plane. Now, I have a bit of a different opinion to you. I don't know, because it's hard to know exactly what he brings in the dressing room, because you're going to assume probably at this World Cup, 15 to 18 players will see significant minutes. Some players may not see minutes at all, depending on how this group goes. So Daniel Henry in the change room could be a vital player. He's been a part of this national team. He's one of John Herdman's guys, and he could probably do a job off the bench. But if you're asking me personally, who I'd rather coming off in a situation like that late in the game to try to close it out, I'm going with the hot hand. I'm going with someone who has been playing incredible form. But again, it's deeper than that. There are other options. We're still not talking about Scott Kennedy, Derek Cornelius. There's Kamal Miller. Those are 3 lefties. In my opinion, out of those center backs plus Henry, someone is going to miss that plane. And I just simply don't know who it is. My gut's telling me it's one of probably Derek Cornelius, which seems a little bit unfair the way he's playing this season, and Joel Waterman. Because I agree with you. I don't think Henry is going to miss that plane. And for a similar reason, I don't think maybe Luka's not going to miss it. Now, again, I mentioned the amount of players that I think is probably going to play a decent, significant role. That still leaves players 19 to 26 who are going to be a part of that, who may not get a ton of minutes. But yeah, Daniel Henry comes in handy when it comes to leadership in the dressing room, and Luka Kolyosho comes down to capping a talented 18-year-old playing La Liga football and stealing him from your rivals, to stealing from the US. Like that's a big thing to maybe walk away from when you're an 18-year-old getting the opportunity to go to a World Cup. So I agree. I was a little skeptical around the the potential last window where Luka obviously came. I don't know what he would have experienced. Now my gut's telling me maybe he saw a cohesive group, a group that was going for an end goal, and maybe that spoke to him. Obviously, we heard a connection with Davies, but yeah, there's a lot to dig in there. But I want to spend a lot of time in this episode around starting 11s, how we think we're going to play, and I think a big part of that is going to be Tajon Buchanan. Now, he was included in the squad, but like I mentioned, I personally don't think he's going to feature. I'm curious to get your takes on it, just because I think Canada, Club Brugge are going to be working together to make sure he's on a decent path. He's in Europe right now. It's going to be nice to lead up with the camp. But so let's first go back to, do you think he's going to feature? And if not, what player, I guess, do you think is kind of speaking out to you that might go in? And then I'll go through a couple different lineups and we'll see if you agree.
Yeah, I don't think he plays at all. I think there's an understanding, as you said, between Bruges and Canada that he won't play. I don't think his injury is fully healed. Talking to people around the player leading up to the squad announcement, I think that was kind of the understanding that it's vital for him to be around the team. And that's important to note here too, is that, we took a few things away from that June window, but it was kind of mostly a wash in terms of what we saw on the pitch. So it's important, I think, for John Herdman to get all these guys kind of working in harmony, because this is your last real kind of test, your last opportunity to get all these guys together before you get on that plane to Qatar. So I think Tajon Buchanan being there is important. And a little surprised that Atiba Hutchinson didn't make the trip either, just to be around the team. But no, I don't think he plays at all. And I know we're going to talk about this, but to me, what stands out about Tajon Buchanan not being in the squad is not just who's going to come in as a like for like, who is going to be able to adapt. One of the most interesting things that I took away from John Herdman's press conference when the squad was announced is that he has 10 forwards on this list. That's a lot, but he's looking to see which players can be tested and which forwards can adapt and play roles that they're not necessarily used to. That's what really stuck out to me, because you look at some of the forwards they brought, Ike Ugbo, Lucas Cavallini, again, no-brainers. They're going to be on the World Cup squad. I know Lucas Cavallini had the unfortunate red card and hasn't played much, but just on balance, he's had a terrific season. Ike Ugbo coming into form in Liga, and I think there's no doubt he's there as well. These guys are both kind of traditional number 9s, poachers right in front of the goal, right? I wonder if John Herdman is looking at them and saying, can you play more on that right side? Not necessarily as a true kind of winger or inverted winger, but can you occupy a different space than you were used to and still be effective? Because there's a plethora of players that can play up top for Canada, but a lot of them have kind of more defined roles with their club side. Kyle Larin as well. Is Junior Hoylett a little bit more? Can he be more effective on the right side? Liam Millar, a player that we haven't talked about yet, kind of a bubble player, but I do think is going to play a lot. He's one of those guys that I think, again, right on the bubble. I think John Herdman needs to be convinced about what he can do, if he's in the World Cup squad. Who can kind of shift into that right side role that Tajon Buchanan, and not necessarily play like Tajon Buchanan. I don't think there's another player on that roster that has the dribbling ability on that right side. And I don't know if Richie Larea is going to be moved up that high up the pitch. So again, Ugbo, Cavallini, Hoylett, Miller, who of these players can kind of jump in, adapt, play a different role? That tactical versatility is something that has become a hallmark of John Herdman's teams. And to me, that's one thing that I'm going to be looking at in this first game against Qatar in particular, is who plays on that right side up top and how well do they do?
And I mean, you raised a lot of interesting questions. Now, me just initially taking away from what you're talking about, I've watched EK play a little bit this season for Troyes, and Mama Balde has taken his spot up front. He's been moved out wide, and I thought he looked absolutely lost. I don't think that he put in a good shift. I don't think he's comfortable there. For me, EK Ugbo is a type of player that, for a Troyes team who doesn't get a lot of chances, he won't get a lot of touches, but when something falls his way, he's a sharp number 9. That's what I like to see about Ugbo. I haven't been convinced. Now, Canada plays a very different style to Troyes. I also don't know if I could see someone like Lucas Cavallini going out wide, but a couple players that you did mention is Kyle Larin, who we've seen play out wide. Now, not necessarily on the right, but he's played out wide for Besiktas. He's played in his first start with Club Brugge kind of out wide. We were always kind of debating if they're going to play with a one-striker system, who moves out. But what about Jonathan David? Jonathan David with Fonseca this year has played in a numerous different roles, and he started off the season playing on that right attacking mid in a 4-2-3-1, and he looked very good. Now, he kind of moved back up to the striker spot, and he's looked very good as well. But I'm wondering if maybe you could see a potential, because I don't think Kyle Larin, just given his goal-scoring form for Canada, will get dropped. And I think I would personally, if we did a one-striker system, would rather someone like Kyle Larin up front, and maybe you move Jonathan David out because he's proven this year with Lille that he can do it. Do you have any thoughts on that, or do you think just because it's Jonathan David, he's a potent striker, he's playing well, he's probably going to stay through the middle?
Yeah, Jonathan David, to me, is still, and I know he's played in a variety of positions at Lille this year, and he's had a great season so far. And he's going to be in that starting 11 again. It's just a matter of where I've always liked him as kind of that second striker, just playing right behind the striker. And, you know, kind of I know it's a strange comparison, but a little bit of a Thomas Muller type, in that he can just find his own space. He can just move instinctively where he feels he needs to and expose those pockets of space. So I like him a little bit more in the middle, and I like that even more considering Canada doesn't really have that true number 10 player that can, you know, thread that final pass. The Kyle Larin shout is a great one. I know he hasn't gotten the minutes that he probably wants at Club Brugge so far, but he's a player that shows up for Canada. And a lot of these players do, you know, have that uncanny ability to show up for Canada. So, I mean, if you were to ask Jonathan David to move to the right side, I'm sure he could. I have no doubt that, you know, he's developed enough tactical versatility, and he's developed his football brain enough that he could move out to that right side. That's what's going to be really interesting here too, is, you know, I know we're just talking about the match against Qatar, but do we see completely different lineups from Qatar to Uruguay, right? Because I really do think this is an opportunity for John Herdman to get different looks and see which players develop some chemistry with each other, right? Tajon Buchanan, what I did like, we talked about the June window, what I really liked about the June window is how well Tajon Buchanan and Alistair Johnston linked up on the right side. It was really kind of seamless stuff. Obviously, that's not going to happen in this window. So who can develop that chemistry, right? Because you want to leave this international window on a high, right? If you're John Herdman and you're in the national team, you don't want to leave this window with more questions than you had going into it. Right. So that's what I'm going to be looking for as well, is it's great to say Jonathan David, try him on the right side. Can he develop that kind of synergy with a Richie Larea, even with an Alistair Johnson, if he moves higher up the pitch? I don't know if he will, but so that's kind of what I'm looking for. If it's Jonathan David, great, but how well can he work with other players?
And now, despite us talking about different players who could play on the right, no one really mentioned is who I put in this 11. So I built 2 teams. We're going to see which one Joshua agrees with more, and you can feel free to tamper it any which way you will. It is also worth noting that you mentioned that could we see John Herdman maybe start different players in a different system? And I think we probably will. Qatar line up in a back 3. They play this 3-4-1-2 type system, and Uruguay are famous for their 4-4-2. So I think we're definitely going to see some flexibility around this side, and just, I mean, these are friendlies. This is an experience for John Herdman to kind of see what this team's made of. So for me, I really see 2 systems here. I have a 4-4-2 and I have a 3-5-2. So yes, Jonathan David will be playing as the dual striker. So with the 4-4-2, I mean, I got Borjan in net, Johnston at right back, Vittoria, Miller, Atakubi at left back. I ended up going with Junior Hoylett at right mid. This is a player, when you talk about versatility, this year with Reading, he's been playing a deeper role, been playing kind of as a wing back. Seems just to be at his age, a team player.
And he's been producing, right?
And he's been producing.
I think that's important to note here. Is like stats are not the be all and end all by any means, but if you can get a player who's producing, who can come in with that confidence, that's huge for John Herdman. Yeah,
and a leader too, and that's the beautiful thing. You don't have someone like Buchanan who's still very young, but is raw and just loves going at players. Hoylett's a little bit more relaxed, I think, around that side. He'll bring the experience, and I think that there's a way with the way he's playing right now. Everyone predicted Reading at the beginning of the season to be in a relegation battle. Meanwhile, right now they're in a promotion battle, and Hoylett's been a big part of it. So I went with him, just kind of that like for like. Buchanan's been playing as a wingback for Bruges, so is Hoylett for Reading. So I just kind of thought that one made sense. Leadership coming in as well. For the two-man midfield to replace Hutch, I went with Samuel Piette. He's on incredible form. He's only 27 years old, 62 caps, and it kind of seemed like he was on the outside of the starting 11, always looking in. Well, with all these injuries, I really think this is an opportunity for him to build on his club form, which I think I've never really seen him in this type of form before. So I partnered him up with Eustachio, Davies on the left, and then Larin and David up front. So before we move on to the next formation, what do you think about that 4-4-2 system? And is there any changes you'd make?
Is there any changes I'd make in a 4-4-2 or
in a 4-4-2? Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm a Sam Piette guy. I love what he brings. Again, not equal to Daniil Henry, but I love what he brings to kind of the squad harmony and chemistry off the pitch. You talk to national team players, they rave about Sam Piette, much in the same way they rave about Daniil Henry, just in terms of how he raises the level during training, keeps the mood light. These kinds of things are important. I guess I worry though about who's going to kind of occupy that higher space in the center of the pitch, because Eustachio, effective as a deeper lying midfielder. And to me, Sam Piette at his most effective when he's playing kind of right in front of the center backs, breaking up plays and then spraying long balls wide. Two players that to me are a little too similar in their makeup. And I would probably, I don't know if you're going to have him in your 3-5-2, but I would probably look at an Ismail Kone. And I know that's a big shout considering how young he is, how new he is to the national team setup. I was in Montreal last weekend, so there's probably some recency bias here, but I was in Montreal last week watching him play live. His fearlessness on the ball is something that isn't present in this Canadian roster as it stands right now. Is he prone to defensive errors? Sure. Does he have a bit of a one-track mind when it comes to dribbling and turning off players? Sure. But, I think Canada needs game breakers up front. And Ismail Kone can be that. They're not going to play him necessarily as that 10, but more as that 8, more as that kind of link-up man that can just be so smooth on the ball. I think there is a place for Sam Piette to A, play in these friendlies, and then B, play in Qatar in the World Cup when they need a little bit more physicality. But I think you're going to get that from Stefan Eustachio anyway. And I guess my concern is having two somewhat similar players in one area of the pitch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was really torn between Samuel Piette and Marc-Anthony Kaye for the 4-4-2 because I agree. I kind of like the way that a 5 could work, and I don't know if it could really work out in this specific system because I'm just picturing maybe Alistair Johnson slides up to wing back, Hoylett tucks in, but then Atakubi would have the drop back, Davies as a wing. So I'm trying to, because it's how Herdman does. He loves moving pieces around.
For sure.
But I feel like this next formation might make that a little more sense, and I have an open position basically for that kind of attacking 8 to bring a little bit more balance to the team. So this one is the 3-5-2. I went with Borien and net. I included Richie Laryea, who is basically the Tejan replacement, kind of out on the right-hand side, obviously a little deeper role, which would leave the 3-man back line of Alistair Johnston, Stephen Vittoria, Kamal Miller, and Samuel Atakubi would be Samuel Atakubi would be dropped, which means that Davies would be kind of operating at the left wing back, which I have no problem him playing there. The 3-man midfield, I went with Eustachio, Piette, and then I added in that player, and I'm kind of open to it, and I guess you kind of answered that, but whether a Jonathan Osorio type player is fit, he could be an option. If not, Ismail Kone, and if not, Junior Hoylett. I know Hoylett's playing a little bit different, but we've often seen him kind of operate under the striker for Canada before. I think he can maybe do that role, but I'd be comfortable with any of those 3 players kind of solidifying that three-man midfield. Probably more Osorio or Kone than Hoylett, but just given an option. And then up front, I had, of course, David and Laren. So I guess out of the two you've heard so far, is there one that you're kind of thinking will be tested against this Qatar side, or is there a different system altogether?
Well, part of the reason I like that the teams that Canada was able to land for these friendlies is they're very, contrasting styles and contrasting quality, which I think is what you're going to get in the World Cup. I think Canada's not expecting to have the ball in all three of their World Cup matches, and I don't think they're expecting to have the ball, in both of these matches. I think you could probably make a good case that they're looking to dominate possession a little bit more against Qatar. That to me is a Jonathan Osorio play, right? I know I back a lot of these guys, but I'm a huge Jonathan Osorio fan. I think he brings incredible quality on the ball, presence of mind, leadership to this team. But he's at his most effective when he's getting those touches. He's slowing play down a bit. He's using his vision to pick out passes. Are you going to be able to do that against Uruguay? I don't know. That's why I like the idea maybe of getting Jonathan Osorio. And I mentioned Ismail Kone, but for me, it's with Tajon Buchanan out, someone has to come in. And to me, it's going to be one of those two guys, Osorio or Ismail Kone. So that's kind of where I'm at. I still think there's a way, especially when you're playing three at the back, which I do think they're going to do in possession, no matter what, three in the back. Yep. I do think that there's a way that you can get both Adekugbe. I should rephrase. I think there's a way that you have to get Adekugbe and Davies on the pitch. I don't think Adekugbe is droppable at this point. Just how consistently he's playing in Turkey, how much prowess he's showing offensively and defensively. He's just become such a vital, player on this team because he can do a bit of both, because he has that chemistry with Alphonso Davies. There's so much pace on that left side. You can really hurt teams on the left side. So I think there's a way you get Adekugbe in that left wing back role and in kind of the outside in the four-man midfield, and then you play Davies higher up as a left forward. I can't believe we're going to have this debate again, but I do feel it's starting to emerge with injuries. Like, where's Alphonso Davies at his best for the national team? To me, in tournament play, you need game breakers where one goal can be the difference between moving on and not moving on. You need game breakers, and that's why you have to play Alphonso Davies. To me, not in a wingback role, but in a forward role. That's where I'm at with that 3-4-3.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think Davies, in certain situations against maybe a nation with a little bit more higher quality, could maybe do a role at a wingback just because his defensive responsibilities would come in handy. But that would mean dropping out of QB. So I definitely know what you're saying, which is why I think ultimately Herman likes this 4-4-2, because it doesn't allow Davies to play too high up, allows him to still run at players because he's direct, he's fast, he's breaking records for how quick he is. It's my favorite thing of watching Davies, just taking on defenders, cutting the ball back, or someone like Jonathan David or Laren to put in the back of the net. We're not going to go through another system, but I like where we're going. But a 3-4-3, maybe, then you push your David/Laren maybe out to the wing and Davies a little bit higher up, but that would leave a two-man midfield. It's fascinating. We don't know what Herman's going to do. Every time I try to pick one of his formations, he just completely curveballs me. But I kind of like that. But before we go here, we got a couple other quick things to touch on. It's interesting. Maybe a lot of you guys don't know this, but in Canada's last 5 matches, they have a 2-0-3 record. We've actually we had a bit of a poor end to our World Cup qualifying, and then the last match, of course, the Honduras one was one to forget as well. Qatar, I mentioned it earlier, have experienced the CONCACAF. They were in the Gold Cup. They did pretty well in it. They haven't lost in their last 5 matches, albeit they'd have 4 draws. And they're star players, who I'm excited to see. Hafif and Ali have been a staple in their national team for a very long time to bring them success. They're going to the World Cup. I know they didn't go through qualifications, but I believe that if they did, they would have probably qualified. They are the Asian Cup champions. I'm curious to see what these two players what kind of test it'll be for this back line, because I really think that they can be game breakers. They have a lot of experience playing together because every player in the Qatar side plays in the Qatari league. They line up friendlies all the time. So this should be a pretty decent test leading into Uruguay. So what to you is the biggest thing you want to take away from this match going into Uruguay, whether it's a tactical thing, whether it's a formation? And then after that, which player do you think is going to have a bigger role in this match against Qatar? Waterman, Corbiano, or Koleosho?
Yeah, I do think Joel Waterman is going to have a bigger role, just because of those offensively inclined players that you mentioned on Qatar's squad. And I just think that he's probably the first man off the bench, in terms of, substitutions in the back. And the reason I like him too is just because he brings something a little bit different, than Canada's those three center backs we listed. Kamal Miller is great at dribbling out of the back, but they don't really have a player like Joel Waterman that can thread a pass out of the back. So I guess that's the player that I'm kind of looking at just as a whole. I mean, I have to come back to it. We are talking about all these chess pieces moving around, and that's great. That's fantastic. But that also places a big kind of onus on these players to figure things out in a short amount of time. So that's kind of what I'm looking at in this game, is who's able to, it sounds simplistic, but who's able to play well with kind of intense and different tactical demands that they would have been used to, right? Who can figure things out on the fly, who can play in a different role than they might, A, with their club side, B, than they have for Canada in the past, because your window now to get things sorted is very, very short. And we know that, John Herdman is one of those managers that, formations are kind of an afterthought in terms of, who can move where, who can occupy different spaces. That's what I'm going to be looking for, is who can do that instinctively and who kind of needs a few more reps to get things right. Because look, that's why, to me, I look at my list for the World Cup squad. I think I'm at 22 locks, right? Because I think John Herdman really values players that have been there throughout qualifying, that understand his tactical demands, that understand instinctively where other players on the pitch move. That's going to be so important. And so that's what I'm looking for in this window, is who can kind of rediscover that chemistry through those movements right away. Because again, your window is really, really small here.
Yeah, this is it. This is obviously the most important window before a World Cup. This is where hopefully John Herdman will play the team he thinks is going to the World Cup. So my biggest takeaway is just simply sit back and watch, because I'm very curious to see which tactical mind he's going to take for each one of these games, because it's two different sides. I mean, the U.S., for example, took possession to Uruguay in the match that happened a few months ago. So I'm curious to see how he's going to learn from that. We know that he has conversations with Berhalter and how he's going to line up these two formations. I want to see if he's going to go over the same, how he's going to tweak it around. Just fascinating. Because I predict it never happens, and I can sit back and like, okay, he went 4-2-3-1 at the Aztec. It's fine. Right. So, and then out of those players, I'm gonna keep a special eye on Kolyosho, even though I do agree with you that probably Herdman or Waterman will see the most minutes under Herdman in this window. And yeah, so that's basically it. Joshua, I'm Josh. That's you. 2 Millhouses, like you mentioned at the beginning. I appreciate you coming on here. You have a special book that you have written. It's called The Voyageurs. You want to tell our audience a little bit about it and maybe how they can get it if they're interested?
Yeah, blocking out my Pearl Jam poster there, so it's important. Yeah, The Voyageurs. Listen, I've been at this book for about a year now. The book aims to tell the story of how the men's national team basically rescued themselves from 1986 to now 1986, their first journey to the World Cup, to now, as fans of this team know, it was not always smooth sailing for this national team. So the book aims to look at the people and the stories behind this, this entire program's overhaul. And it basically tries to answer the question, how did Canada get back to the World Cup? So there's a ton of great stories in there, exclusive interviews, and hopefully for people that are kind of just getting into the national team, insight into how, this country is a soccer country. And I say that because more kids still play soccer than any other team sport in the country. And I think a lot of people outside of Canada are always surprised to hear that. What I tried to do was look at how did, Canada as a country, how did the CSA harness that and get these players into the men's national team program, a program that, wasn't always at the forefront for the CSA, but I think it firmly is now. I sincerely hope people enjoy it. It was an enjoyable experience writing this book. I did it throughout the final round of qualifying, where there was a ton of, a wave of momentum throughout this team, and people were eager to share their stories. Again, there's a lot of kind of characters and stories in here that I don't think a lot of people will be familiar with, but that's important because there's so many people that contributed to the rise of this men's national team. People think Davies and David, and that's important. They're going to be the ones scoring the goals, but there were so many people kind of giving those players and giving the entire program a push on the swing to kind of get them to where they are. And my hope is that this book kind of tells the story of those people behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's been an incredible story, and it's fantastic, Joshua. You're able to capture it. I'll leave the link to the book in the description. So if anyone is curious of going through the process of this incredible rise, the link will be in the description. Joshua, as always, I really appreciate you giving the time to come on today. And one quick last thing before you go, prediction, my prediction, and then a good old wave.
Yeah, prediction. I think I'm going to go with 2-1 Canada over Qatar.
That's what I was going to say. So I'll spice it up. I'll go 3-1 Canada. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. I'll see you soon. Cheers, friends.